And welcome back to Carolina Wildside. I'm Miles Crosby, your host, along with our co-host Ben Alderman. And Ben, I want to take a moment to thank our guests that were in the studio, some very special guests. First, Kim Iverson. Kim is she's the Public Relations Information Officer for the South Atlantic Fisheries Management Council. Kim, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And also a big welcome to Robert Wiggers. Robert is the fisheries biologist with the Office of Fisheries Management with the DNR. And once again, Robert, thank you for joining us as well.
Glad to be here.
And Ben, of course, we're here today to talk about some very important issues and some closures that are happening in and around the southeastern Atlantic waters. Tell us a little bit more about what's going on.
Sure, Miles. Well, usually we've kept the topics kind of light on the show so far, but this is a serious topic that most recreational, commercial, and any kind of fishermen around our state are really interested in and are keeping track of. Right. And Kim is at the heart of the storm, and as the information officer for the SAFMC, basically, we'd first off like to know what you guys do at the SAFMC and who makes up the board.
Okay, thank you. The council, the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council, is one of 8 fishery management councils in the country. We happen to be headquartered here in North Charleston, South Carolina. Our area of jurisdiction is from, the council's area of jurisdiction is from the North Carolina-Virginia border all the way throughout the southeast down to the east coast of Florida, down through the Florida Keys and the Dry Tortugas. So that's a very large area. Huge. The council is made up of representatives from each of the 4 southeastern states. We have both commercial and recreational fishermen that serve on the council, as well as each of the states have their marine resources agency representatives on the council. We do have Robert Boyles representing the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, as well as David Kupka and Tom Swatzel serve as our South Carolina representatives here on the council. So the council is responsible for the conservation and management of species in federal waters, and those include the bottom fish that we'll be talking about today, the snapper grouper species, as well as mackerel, king and Spanish mackerel, dolphin, wahoo, and cobia. The council does not regulate billfish and highly migratory species such as sharks and tunas.
Well, one of the main things we would like to get out, people right now are hearing about the new regulations and the closure of the fishery for snapper and grouper, and you know, they're wondering what they can do right now, if they can even go fishing for snapper and grouper, what areas are open, and you know, what's off limits.
Sure. And then we had a lot of new regulations that went into place after the first of the year, and I'm sure that fishermen are a bit concerned and want to know, have some clarification on that. Several new regulations that impact recreational fishermen are January 1st closure of the shallow water grouper. That came about through an amendment that was approved by the National Marine Fisheries Service and proposed by the council back in July of this year, but the closure went into place in January 1, and it will be closed. The shallow water grouper species will be prohibited from harvest through April. So May 1st, you'll have that shallow water grouper complex that's open back up. And those include species like gag, red grouper, black grouper, scamp, and the other shallow water grouper species.
Kim, I've got a question, just as a layman who, really, when it comes to this sort of fishing, I've gone off on some of these bottom fishing boats a few times. How does that affect them? Does that completely shut them down, or what's going to happen?
No, there are other species that can be fished outside of that shallow water grouper. There are 2 other species right now that are closed to harvest. There's 73 species in that management complex. So you're looking at a broad range of species, everything from amberjack to porgies to red snapper and gag.
So when a recreational angler catches one of these fish that you can't determine what you're going to catch before you actually catch it in most instances. So if you catch a species that's on the banned list, what are you supposed to do?
You should release it immediately, as quickly as possible. If it's a gut hook fish or you need to use a dehooking device, those are required now as necessary to dehook those fish. But there are still species that are open, your grunts, the red porgy are open, black sea bass, some other species that were amberjack, right. Some of the other species that are in that management complex. The council's intent is to reduce the harvest and the targeting of these shallow water grouper during the spawning season. Right. January through April is a standard, and it does vary depending whether you're off the coast of North Carolina or Florida, but there is a spawning time in which those species aggregate and are more easily targeted.
Now, Kim, one of the other things I did want to ask, Ben and I were talking about this a little while ago. Which, by the way, I do want to mention a article in the Post and Courier that recently came out about this very thing, a very good article that I just finished reading. And one of the things is, I understand that there's some situations where you could legally catch these fish, but you could cross other waters and you have to stow your gear. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Miles, that gets to something that the council's looking at as far as an area closure. That's something that's in the future. This is not something that's in place right now. The shallow water grouper closure is in place starting January 1 through April.
Right.
The red snapper closure is in place for both commercial and recreational fisheries right now. And of course, vermilion snapper are closed to recreational fishery through March. So those are 3 closures that are in place. But one of the things that the council is looking at in order to end overfishing for red snapper are these larger area closures for all bottom fishing. Now, this is something that's proposed, and a lot of fishermen are confused and they say, well, all bottom fishing is banned already. That's not the case. The council has requested an interim rule to close the red snapper fishery, and that's the rule that's in effect now. But the council is also looking at larger area closures in which all snapper grouper fishing, those 73 species, would be prohibited from harvesting. And if that were to occur in the future, then there would be some sort of transit provision that would be allowed where fishermen could cross over that area, at least look at different options for transiting that area.
And they would, I guess, have to stow gear and that sort
Absolutely.
of thing.
There would be details that would be worked out. But this is all things that the council is looking at in the future. These things are not in place right now.
So right now, what's in place right now is I understand, for 180 days, and then it's to be re-evaluated, and then again for another 186 days?
Specific to red snapper. Red snapper is one of 10 species that are currently listed as undergoing overfishing. A recent stock assessment, 2008 stock assessment showed the red snapper undergoing overfishing and overfished to an alarming degree, according to the stock assessment.
And we're talking to Kim Iverson, once again the Public Information Officer with the South Atlantic Fishery Management Council. And we're going to take a quick break, but we've got more information. We're also going to bring in our guest, Robert Wiggers from the Department of Natural Resources. He's going to have his take on this controversial issue with some closures here in the South Atlantic. More on Carolina Wildside next.